Good morning, friends. In the last video, that is indirect tax part 1, we have seen the impact of all indirect taxes in pre-GST era on consumer spending, right? With that, you must have got the idea that almost 41% was the incidence of indirect tax which was borne by the customer. However, upon introduction of GST, that is with effect from 1st of July 2017, the consumers are supposed to bear on an average 18% of GST. And that's how there is a saving on the part of consumers, and that saving will be effectively channelized or directed in the economy either on savings route or on consumer spending route. So either way, it is going to benefit to the Indian economy, that we have seen. Having seen that, today we are going to view the part 2 of indirect tax, that is GST. But friends, as you know, my style of interacting with you, unless you are exposed to the pre-GST era indirect taxation structure and the characteristics of those indirect taxes, the understanding of GST would be little difficult. That's why, to facilitate you for understanding GST in much better manner and fashion, I intend to deal with you on the pre-GST regime indirect tax structure and would like to discuss and make you understand what was that indirect tax structure. In pre-GST era, the indirect tax structure, once you refer to my GST presentation, you will appreciate especially the second slide. The second slide gives you the entire gamut of indirect tax levies in India. They are bifurcated into central levy and state levy, right? And in that central levy, as we have seen last time, that the first incidence of tax upon manufacture of goods was central excise. Now that central excise, the levy of central excise was made applicable provided 4 elements were present. So the taxable event in pre-GST regime or era was, for individual indirect tax, the incidence of tax or the point of taxation was the happening of certain event. Say for example, to attract central excise on goods manufactured or produced in India as per section 3 of Central Excise Act, the 4 M's condition was must. 4 M. What is M? First, goods must be good. There must be goods. The goods will have 2 characteristics, that is movable and marketable. So anything which is movable and marketable is the main feature of the goods. So if the central excise levy has to be levied on goods manufactured or produced in India, these 2 M's were must, that is manufacture and movable. Another 2 M's, that is marketable and mentioned in Central Excise Tariff Act. So in effect, if all these 4 M's are present, that is goods manufactured in India, goods, those which are manufactured in India should be movable. Third, the goods should be marketable. And the fourth, that should be a mention in the tariff of Central Excise Act. Then if all these 4 M's are present, then only the goods were susceptible or liable for excise duty. If one of the M was missing, then excise duty was not applicable. Just to give you an example, when a building is constructed, the building is constructed on land. The moment it is constructed on land, you cannot move that building or shift that building virtually. It means that building is immovable. On immovable building, there was no excise duty element because it was immovable. Like that, any plant and machinery which is immovable, like a big refinery, then excise duty is not applicable on the entire refinery as such, because being immovable. So movability or immovability is the criteria. If it is immovable, no excise duty. If it is movable, excise duty is applicable. Like that, another aim is manufacture. What do you mean by manufacture? Manufacture means carrying out certain process on raw material. So there is raw material on one hand and finished goods on the other hand. The raw material, when deployed with some process or applied with some process, may it be manual, may it be mechanical, may it be electrical, may it be electronic, may it be natural, may it be chemical, may it be atomic, any kind of process. So if any kind of process is employed upon raw material and thereby it is converted into a finished goods which is commercially differently known to the market as finished goods, then one can say that manufacture has emerged. And the moment manufacture has emerged, there has to be a central excise duty. If there is no manufacture, then there is no central excise duty. But however, whenever courts used to give decision in favor of certain commodities or goods, saying that it does not amount to manufacture of new commercial commodity, then the Central Excise Tariff Act used to get amended and they used to say that a particular process is deemed manufacture. Say for example, you must have heard of canning industry. Canning means foodstuffs, they are preserved, correct? Or fruits, they are cleaned, deskinned, chopped, and with preservatives they are kept in a airtight container, sealed packed container, and those containers are available in the market. The moment this particular industry started operations in India, excise authorities started levying excise duty on that. They said that you have manufactured something. Friends, the matter went up to Supreme Court in case of canning food industries or canned fruits industries, and the Supreme Court held a decision that the fruit remains fruit, pineapple remains pineapple, because pineapple is available in the market as seasonal fruit, you all aware, but the pineapple in tin condition, correct, in canned food condition is available throughout the year because of the canning process. So in canning process, what do? They clean the pineapple, they deskin the pineapple, they take out those thorns, etc. They cut off that green bunch of leaves which is appearing on the top of pineapple, right? So that dehusked, decleaned, cleaned or deskinned pineapple is further cut into slice, and maybe with sugar syrup or kind of a natural preservatives or adding some little chemical preservatives, those are packed in sealed tins, and those tins are available readily in the market. The matter went to Supreme Court. The tin was opened in front of Supreme Court and offered to the bench, saying that, look, Your Lordship, what is this? Pineapple. The moment it is decided that whatever has been taken out from the tin is pineapple, then the defense rested, saying that pineapple remained pineapple. So cutting of fruit, deskinning of the fruit, chopping of the fruits, adding with preservatives and sealing it in a packed container does not amount to manufacture. The moment that Supreme Court favorable decision came in favor of this canned fruit industry, then immediately there was an amendment to Central Excise Tariff Act saying that anything with respect to fruits, that is taking out skins, peeling, chopping, cutting and sealing it with preservative or otherwise, with natural preservative or otherwise, deems to be manufacture, is deemed manufacture. So this deemed manufacture concept was dangerous, which did away any process which does not amount to manufacture. Say another example I can give you. In case of pipes, steel pipes, MS steel pipes, those who are engineer will appreciate that MS pipes are generally classified as A class pipe, B class pipe, C class pipe. That pipe, MS pipe, if just kept into the atmospheric place where it is exposed to atmosphere, it gets rusted, right? So to arrest that rust, generally those pipes, steel pipes, are galvanized from inside as well as outside. A silver kind of a coating, correct, glittering coating is given, and that is called galvanizing. Now the matter went again to the court saying that galvanizing, whether galvanizing amounts to manufacture, because after galvanizing also the generic nature of the pipe does not change. Pipe remains pipe. So the moment pipe remains pipe, nobody says that it is a galvanized pipe, inside, outside, or coated galvanized pipe. It is a pipe, MS pipe. So pipe, main characteristic of MS pipe remains whether it is coated or not coated. So pipe, when coated, then also it remains pipe. So pipe remains pipe, like pineapple remained pineapple. So the process of galvanizing was not considered as amounting to manufacture. The moment the decision came, 6 months down the line, the Central Excise Tariff Act is amended by the government, saying that any process carried out like galvanizing or anodizing or powder coating amounts to deemed manufacture. So deemed manufacture concept was introduced. So marketability, movability, or manufacturing or deemed manufacturing. These 3 M's are satisfied, and the 4th M, if it is satisfied, that is that particular product is identifiable or identified in Central Excise Tariff Act, then all 4 M's are satisfied, excise is levied. Now upon levy of Central Excise, manufacturer is not going to remain or keep goods in his stocks forever. He is going to naturally sell those goods. The moment he carries out sale, the taxable event occurs under Maharashtra VAT Act. The moment sale takes place, Maharashtra VAT gets attracted. So friends, here you will appreciate that pre-GST regime or pre-GST indirect tax era, in indirect tax era pre-GST, what was the taxable event? There used to be specific taxable event. So with case of excise, in case of excise or levy of excise, 4 M's is the taxable event. Namely, movable, marketable, manufactured, and mentioned in Central Excise Tariff. Likewise, in case of MVAT, Maharashtra VAT, or for that matter any state VAT in India, the moment sale takes place inside the state where manufacturer or a wholesaler or retailer or anybody who is a seller is located in the same state wherein the customer is also located, the sale is taking place inside that state. The moment sale is taking place, MVAT will be applicable in Maharashtra, or GVAT will be applicable in Gujarat, or MP VAT will be applicable in Madhya Pradesh. The taxable event is sale. Like that, for central sales tax, what would be the taxable event? When the goods are sold in the course of interstate trade or commerce, where 2 states are involved. When the movement is of goods from one state to another state, what is attracted? Central sales tax is attracted. So like that, under pre-GST regime, there used to be a taxable event. And taxable event with respect to each indirect tax. We have seen excise, we have seen MVAT, we have seen CST. Like that, octroi. What is the taxable event for octroi? Taxable event for octroi is bringing in goods into a local geographical territory of Greater Mumbai, Mumbai Mahanagar Palika. So the moment goods are coming in Mumbai Mahanagar Palika, at the point of border of Mumbai Mahanagar Palika, that checkpost, when goods cross that checkpost and enter in Mumbai for consumption, sale or otherwise, octroi is applicable. So again, the taxable incidence for octroi was entry of goods into the local area, geographical area of that municipality or local authority or cantonment board for consumption. So all these they were taxable events. So I would say with every indirect tax, there was a taxable event defined in pre-GST era. Now in post-GST era, the difference is there is only one taxable event. What is that taxable event? The taxable event is supply of goods or services. So they are saying there are only 2 types of supply. One is supply of goods and the second one is supply of services. There is no third. And the taxable event is supply. And the beauty is supply is not defined under GST. So anything you do or you don't do amounts to supply. That is the beauty. And that's what we are going to unveil in this GST presentation, slide after slide, right? So you will concentrate on the first slide, that is the introductory slide, right? That introductory slide is GST, goods and service tax. The presentation starts with the first slide. Second slide gives you previous tax structure, that is indirect tax levies in India divided into central levy and state levy, that slide. And then I have tried to explain you the incidence of taxation with respect to individual indirect tax levy, pre-GST era. Then we come to previous tax structure. In this previous tax structure, the third slide I tried to explain what was the taxable event, like manufacturer manufactures the goods and then first excise duty is levied or VAT or CST is levied, right? VAT or CST is levied, because VAT, if the goods are taking sale within that particular state, VAT will be applicable. If the manufacturer is located in one state and consumer is located in another state and goods are moved from one state to another in pursuance of sale, then CST was applicable. So excise plus VAT or excise plus CST, that was the previous tax structure. Then from wholesaler to retailer, again VAT or CST as the case may be will be applicable. If wholesaler and retailer are in the same state, then VAT will be applicable, that state VAT will be applicable. If wholesaler and retailer are in two different states, then CST will be applicable, right? From retailer, goods go to the consumer. If retailer and consumer are in the same state, VAT would be applicable. If not, they are in two different states, then CST will be applicable. That was the previous tax structure. That is the third slide, right? So this is the previous tax structure. Under GST, what would be the tax structure and how the transaction takes place, we will see in the following slides. Okay, so we will see now the fourth slide onwards on presentation. The presentation will run through over the screen in front of you, and side by side I will start giving commentary. I hope it is okay with you. Friends, now we will start discussion on the slides for GST presentation. The first slide is generally the title of the presentation, GST, Goods and Service Tax. The second slide pertains to previous tax structure, wherein I have summarized the indirect tax levies in India in pre-GST regime, divided into central levy and state levy, wherein central government and state government was having their own source of revenue through variety of indirect taxes. Third slide is the previous tax structure which I have explained, that is manufacturer, then wholesaler, retailer and consumer. Consumer pays all the taxes and bears the brunt of entire indirect tax levied on the goods and services. The next slide is again at a cost of repetition. I am saying previous indirect tax structure, that is central government, which is one is customs duty, second one excise duty, third one CST, central sales tax, and the fourth one is service tax. And on the other hand, state levies, that is the state VAT, luxury tax, electricity duty, entertainment tax, entry tax and octroi. Both these, central levy and state levy, are subsumed into GST, and the new levy called Goods and Service Tax is emerged. However, while subsuming all these central and state levy, one levy, that is customs duty, is outside the purview of GST. It means on imports, even post GST regime, there will be IGST levied and customs duty levied. So custom duty will continue even post GST regime, because custom duty, the incidence of tax is of importation of goods into India from outside India. So friends, if at any given point of time you are bringing goods along with you while coming to India from abroad, then custom duty is levied. Likewise, any goods are imported by steamer or ship and they are being unloaded at our Mumbai Port Trust or JNPT, correct, Jawaharlal Nehru Port Trust, JNPT, Nhava Sheva, then custom duty will be levied. So along with custom duty, IGST also will be levied. So custom duty is outside the purview of GST. And other than custom duty, all central duties, levies and state levies are subsumed into GST. Next slide, what is GST? GST is a consumption based tax levied on sale, manufacture and consumption on goods and services at a national level. So here friends, GST is a consolidated tax. Earlier in pre-GST regime, there was service tax to be levied on services, rendition of service, and sales tax or VAT were levied on sale of goods. Now under GST regime, both these goods and service tax is effectively combined and there is only one levy of GST. But you may say that when one GST is there, then why there are different GSTs like CGST, SGST, IGST or UTGST? Why these four different names? Friends, though there are these four different names, the tax is one and the same, called goods and service tax. Because as you are aware that in India, the structure is state and central government, correct? Federal structure. So post GST regime also, the state government should get their pound of revenue and center should continue to get their pound of revenue from taxes, indirect taxes. That's why state GST and CGST. CGST means central GST, right? Now, if the goods are being sold within the state, then central GST, that is CGST and SGST will be levied, right? And if goods are sold in interstate trade or commerce, wherein two states are involved and goods are moving from one state to another, right? Or the seller is in one state and the buyer is in another state, or seller and buyer are in the same state but the goods are moving in two different states, then IGST will be levied, and IGST will be C plus SGST, correct? That kind of a structure. And if in that whole process state is replaced by union territory, then naturally union territory tax, UTGST, right? UTGST. So that's how people misunderstand that there are four taxes: CGST, SGST, IGST and UTGST. But in effect, they are not four. They are the components. Tax is only one, that is GST, right? This tax will substitute for all indirect tax levied by state and central government. Exports and direct tax like income tax, corporate tax and capital gains tax will not be affected by GST. They are outside the purview of GST. Again, GST would apply to all goods and services other than crude petroleum, that is crude oil, motor spirit, diesel, aviation and turbine fuel and natural gas. These particular commodities are specifically and purposefully kept outside the purview of GST, right? Because there are a lot of subsidies being given by the central government. Now this tax system, that is the new GST tax system, will take the form of dual GST and will comprise of central GST, that is CGST, which will be levied by center. Next, state GST, which will be levied by state, and integrated GST, IGST. Some people misunderstand it as interstate GST. It is not interstate, but it is integrated GST, which will be levied by central government on interstate supply of goods and services. Correct? Now, having seen what is GST, let us see the slide of tax structure under GST. In tax structure under GST, what will happen? It is in comparison with the earlier slide. That is the slide which I have discussed some time back, few minutes back. That is tax structure under pre-GST era. Here, now I am trying to discuss tax structure under GST era. Manufacturer will manufacture goods and he will supply it to the wholesaler. Now I am using specifically the word supply and not sale, because the taxable event, as I have explained you, under GST is not sale but supply, right? So manufacturer will tend to supply goods to wholesaler. If manufacturer and wholesaler are in the same state, then what would be applicable? What is mentioned on the screen? SGST, CGST. So CGST and SGST will be applicable, right? IGST and UTGST will be absent because manufacturer and wholesaler are in the same state. Assume this manufacturer and wholesaler are not in the same state, then what structure would be applicable? That is IGST. Means SGST and CGST would be absent. UTGST of course will be absent. Only IGST will be applicable. Assume manufacturer is in one state and wholesaler is in union territory. Then what structure would apply? Naturally, CGST and UTGST will be applicable. So consequently, SGST and IGST will be absent. So friends, have you understood on this first lap that is the goods being supplied by manufacturer to wholesaler, the taxable event called supply has taken place, and based on this situation that where the manufacturer and wholesaler is located, the applicable GST will be levied. That is, if manufacturer and wholesaler is in the same state, CGST plus SGST. If manufacturer and wholesaler are in two different states, then IGST. If manufacturer is in one state and wholesaler is in union territory, IGST. If manufacturer and wholesaler is located in one union territory, then CGST and UTGST. I hope I am clear. What is applicable for the first LAP, that is supply of goods between manufacturer to wholesaler, the same structure, GST structure, would be applicable for second LAP of the transaction, that is from wholesaler to retailer. When wholesaler is going to supply to retailer, CGST plus SGST would be applicable if wholesaler and retailer are in the same state. If they are in two different states, IGST will be applicable. If wholesaler and retailer are located in state and union territory, then also IGST will be applicable. If wholesaler and retailer are present in the union territory, then CGST and UTGST will be applicable. Same is the case for the last LAP, that is from retailer to supply by retailer to customer. Okay, now we move on to the next slide, that is need of GST. What is the need of GST? Avoid double taxation, correct? Then avoid cascading effect. Friends, avoid double taxation means same goods should not be susceptible to tax twice, because in pre-GST regime there used to be double taxation, correct, based on taxable event. On goods, excise duty was applicable immediately upon manufacture, and when the same goods are sold again inside the state, state VAT was applicable. So double taxation of goods. Or manufactured goods, excise duty is applicable, and if goods are sold in interstate trade or commerce, CST was applicable. So again double taxation of the same goods, isn't it? Then when the goods are entering into a local area, octroi was leviable, means again those same goods are susceptible for taxation for the third time, correct? Excise, VAT or CST as the case may be, and octroi. So 3 times the goods were taxed. Now under GST, they will be taxed only once, called GST, wherein the VAT is also subsumed, CST is also subsumed, excise is also subsumed, octroi is also subsumed. So I hope you have understood that there is an avoidance of double taxation. Then avoiding cascading effect. Friends, you recall our discussion and the slide which or the board, writing on the board, which I have given in the previous video, that is indirect tax part 1, wherein I have said goods are manufactured for 100, on that excise duty is levied at 12.5, so 112.5. On 112.5, when the goods are sold, VAT used to be levied at 15%, but on what? On 112.5. So 15% was on 100 as well as 12.5. That's what I mean cascading effect. Cascading effect means tax on tax. So under GST, there is no cascading effect. They have avoided cascading effect. It is only one time, plain and simple levy of GST. So avoiding of cascading effect. Third, level playing field. Friends, in earlier days, pre-GST regime, the state governments used to decide the taxation rate for goods and commodities in that respective states when sale is taking place, right? Say for example, in Maharashtra, those days, the cement was leviable at 12.5%. However, at the same time, in Gujarat, that cement was susceptible for 15%. There was a difference of 2.5%, 12.5 and 15, 2.5% difference on the taxation of cement for local sale in state of Maharashtra vis-a-vis state of Gujarat. So, if somebody wants to consume cement in Gujarat, that person or consumer in Gujarat may explore possibility to bring cement from Maharashtra to save that 2.5, and that's how there used to be a shift of trade in pre-GST regime. But in post-GST regime, since the GST rates are going to be uniform for all the states and for all the commodities, correct? Then the level playing field will be there for manufacturers in all the states. correct? And the country will be treated as one market. It will emerge as one market, as our Prime Minister has said, one nation, one tax. So level playing field, right? And then simplified and unified tax system means you have to deal only with one authority called GST authority. Of course, in that two authorities, state GST and central GST. But again, the charge will be given to either of them. Either state authority will assess you or central authority will assess you. Both the authorities will not come to your doorsteps or on your business premises. So simplified and unified tax system. Ease of doing business. Friends, ease of doing business under GST, what is contemplated is there are no check posts or barriers. Correct? E-way bill is there, that you have to generate a e-way bill while selling the goods from one state to another or within the state as well. But that e-way bill can be assessed by the assessing authority even on mobile, with mobile app, correct? Or you can have a hard copy of e-way bill and can show it while crossing the borders of the state. But then there are no check posts. The goods will not be detained at the check post. Anytime while goods being freely moved in the country, the GST authority, state or center, they can ask for the correctness of the goods and invoices, genuineness of the transaction by checking the e-way bill, which is generated on net based, correct? So that is what is ease of doing business. Then reduce interface with different departments, central, state and local bodies. Friends, in pre-GST regime, we used to have three assessments: CST assessment, VAT assessment, excise assessment, service tax assessment, octroi, correct? So now here, instead of dealing with these 4-5 different authorities, that too divided in central government and state government, you can deal with only one authority, either state authority, state GST or central GST, who is your jurisdictional officer. Then simple collection system. Simple collection system means the payment is net based, so you can pay from your establishment directly from your bank account, facilitating internet payment. So simple collection system and reduction in collection of revenue cost. So cost, there is a cost. For revenue collection also there is a cost. Earlier there used to be sales tax officers, inspectors and then banks, and you have to pay tax through bank, and then that information has to flow from bank to the department, and then department, somebody, inspector or clerk or some superintendent used to come to collect and verify the challans, etc. So all that is gone. Now it is net based, correct, challan, with the code generated, system generated code, whereby they can trace the payment of taxes. So the cost of collection of revenue is reduced, considerably reduced. Then broad constituents of goods and service tax. Friends, as I explained you in this particular next slide, we will see GST. GST is intrastate or intrastate. What do you mean by intrastate? Intrastate means within the state. Intrastate means between two states, when goods are moving between two states. So, as I explained you earlier, in intrastate, what would be the applicable GST? CGST and SGST, or CGST and UTGST, as the case may be. Right? So if the supplier of goods and the consumer of the goods both are located in the same state, upon supply of goods, CGST and SGST will be applicable. If the supplier of goods and consumer of goods is located in the union territory, then what would be applicable? CGST and UTGST will be applicable. Right? Now, if you see the another type of transaction, that is intrastate, where supplier is located in one state and consumer is in another state, correct? Or supplier is located in one state and consumer is located in another union territory, then when goods are moving intrastate, what would be applicable? It would be IGST. And friends, arithmetically, IGST is equal to CGST plus SGST. Just to give you a simple explanation, assume the GST rate is 19% and goods are moving in intrastate. What would be applicable? IGST at 18%. Suppose the same transaction, if goods are moving within the state, that is supplier and consumer are in the same state, then what would be applicable? 18% GST, but divided into 9% CGST and 9% SGST. I hope I am clear in my explanation. Correct? So GST in effect is 18% applicable on those goods, but depending on the transaction, if it is taking place in intrastate, IGST at 18%. If it is
taking place within state, that is intra-state, then 9% CGST plus 9% SGST. Correct? Or if it is happening in union territory, then 9% CGST and 9% UTGST. Effectively 18% GST. I hope I am clear. Now I proceed to the next slide, that is taxes to be subsumed into CGST. Taxes to be subsumed into CGST is excise duty, service tax, SAD, that is special additional duty, correct, purchase, right, then cesses and CVD plus medical excise. So all that is subsumed into CGST. Taxes, next slide, taxes to be subsumed in SGST, that is VAT, value added tax, state VAT of course, or sales tax, entry tax, octroi or LBT. LBT means local body tax, luxury tax, then purchase tax, entertainment tax, taxes on lottery, betting and gambling, state cesses and surcharge. Correct? So that's how it is, that all these state levies will be subsumed under SGST. Now GST is, next slide, I'll try to cover the variety of transactions. That is, GST is applicable to what? GST is applicable to sale. So if sale is taking place, GST will be applicable. Transfer, if you are transferring something, correct, then GST will be applicable. Barter, if you are exchanging goods for goods, GST will be applicable. Exchange, if you are exchanging one property to another, property from one hands to other, GST will be applicable, right? Lease, that is, if you have given certain goods on lease, correct, or plant and machinery on lease, then GST will be applicable. And even on disposal, if you are going to dispose something, that is scrap something, right, then that scrap sale also will attract GST. Friends, I hope I am clear on this. There is a taxable event called supply. It is not only sale, it is not only transfer, it is not only barter, exchange, lease, disposal, correct? So that is the biggest difference between pre-GST and post-GST regime. Now functioning of GST, the next slide I have devoted for functioning of GST, how it starts, right? In this slide, start with a foreign territory, that from foreign territory the goods, correct, are imported into state 1, which is indicated in the red, state 1. Then what happens? When goods are coming from foreign territory to state 1, when they land there, what would be applicable? Applicable would be customs duty plus IGST, right? Customs duty plus IGST. Now, after landing it in the state 1, if the supplier and consumer are located in state 1, then what would be applicable? So I have shown it or indicated it with a red arrow, which says in that, on that particular within intrastate transaction or within state transaction, CGST and SGST would be applicable. Now assuming upon importation the goods have landed in state 1, but they are not consumed in state 1, they go to state 2, then what will be applicable? When the goods will move from state 1 to the second state, which is indicated in green, then IGST would be applicable. Are you getting my point? Yes. After having landed in state 2, which is indicated in green, and further transaction takes place within or inside that state, state 2, what would be applicable? CGST plus SGST, right? Assume the transaction pertaining to sale or supply is not happening in state 2. From state 2, goods are going to the union territory, correct? Union territory, that is indicated in blue. Then what happens? Then IGST will be applicable on the transaction between the state 2, which is indicated in green, and UT, which is indicated in blue, right? Blue color. IGST will be applicable. Now, after having goods landed in the union territory, if they are being sold locally within union territory, then what would be applicable? CGST plus UTGST, right? Likewise, conversely, I have taken a reverse cycle also. That is, if goods are coming directly from foreign territory to UTGST, correct? The arrow is indicated towards blue, from foreign territory. Concentrate on that. Then what will happen? IGST plus custom duty will be applicable, when goods are imported from foreign territory to union territory, and if the sale is taking place subsequently in union territory, then UT GST and CGST would be applicable. I hope the functioning of GST is clarified with this slide. Next, intrastate supply. Intrastate supply, how the working, that I have tried to explain you the working. Suppose the intrastate means within the state, the manufacturer or supplier of goods is in Delhi and customer is also located in Delhi. Then what happens? Location of supplier is equal to place of supply, right? Then what is applicable? SGST plus CGST or CGST plus SGST, correct? Right? When both are located in the same state, intrastate supply. Next slide, interstate supply. Interstate supply, how working is effected is depicted in this particular slide, where the supplier is located in Delhi and customer is located in Haryana. Then what is the equation? The equation is location of supplier is not equal to the place of supply, correct? Where the customer is located. Then what would be applicable? Naturally, IGST would be applicable. Clear? With these two slides, you are clear about the working for intrastate and interstate. Now I move on to the next slide, that is benefits of GST. Correct? Benefits here in this slide, I have tried to analyze what all the benefits will be available to public at large for GST, implementation of GST. Overall reduction in price of the consumers, that we have seen when we analyzed in the video 1 pre-GST regime, the incidence of total indirect taxes was as high as 41%. In GST regime, it has curtailed, it has come down to 18%. So effectively, there is a saving of almost 23%, right? So overall reduction in prices for consumers or in consumer spending, reduction in multiplicity of taxes, cascading effect and double taxation, correct? So by introducing GST, the government is aiming to achieve reduction in multiplicity of taxes. Multiplicity of taxes means different rates of taxes for different goods and qua different states. So every state earlier had prerogative to determine the rate of tax. Now the rate of tax will be determined by GST Council, which is being represented by the representatives of state government, state finance ministers and central finance minister, correct? And independent authority. So that is GST Council will decide the rates, and those rates will be uniform throughout India and union territories and all states, correct? So reduction in multiplicity of taxes, cascading effect. Cascading effect means there is no tax on tax, correct? First excise, then 100 plus excise, plus on that VAT, plus next for levying octroi 100 plus excise plus VAT on all that octroi. So cascading effect is done away with. GST is plain and simple, will be levied at 18% or 9 plus 9%, correct? So cascading effect is done away with. And double taxation. Double taxation means at the event of manufacture, excise duty; at the event of sale, VAT or CST; at the event of importation into local geographical region, octroi or entry tax or LBT. All that different taxes or double taxation on goods is avoided. Uniform rate of tax and common national market. So one tax, one nation, one tax, one market. That's the slogan which our Prime Minister had given. So that is the crux. Then border tax base and broader tax base and decrease in black transactions, because here if you want to take input credit, correct, means whatever tax you pay at the point of purchase, you want to offset or adjust it against your taxation at the point of sale or supply, correct? Output tax, input tax is to be adjusted against output tax, then you need to preserve bill, and the transaction should happen under the cover of e-way bill and the invoice, tax invoice. That's how the broader tax base and decrease in black transactions, without bill transactions will not take place, which is not anticipated under GST. Then free flow of goods and services, no checkpoints, correct? So one nation, one market, no in between barriers for states, correct? So free flow of goods and services, no checkpoints. And non-intrusive electronic tax compliance system means you need not be at the mercy of the assessing authority or the whims and fancies of assessing authority and their mood, correct? Naturally, the human element is tried to be eliminated, or if not eliminated, at least drastically reduced. So no bribes, correct? So no intrusive electronic, non-intrusive and electronic tax compliance system. You will be dealing with portal, you will be dealing with government authorities via portal, correct? So through electronic based, net based, right? Now here friends, in practically how the transactions takes place, it is quite possible that every time the supplier and customer may not be located in the same state. So here I have tried to explain these nuances of GST under bill to ship to model under GST. In reality, in commercial transactions in reality, how they take place, that you are a supplier from Mumbai, your customer is located in Delhi, and he, in turn his customer is located in Punjab. So Delhi supplier places an order on Mumbai supplier in effect, as per the instructions of Delhi customer, sends goods to Delhi customers, end customer located in Punjab or Tamil Nadu, as the case may be. So goods move directly from Mumbai to Tamil Nadu or Punjab as per the instructions of Delhi based customer or buyer. So tripartite transactions, three parties are being involved, right? So how it happens, that can be peculiarly addressed to by a bill to ship to model under GST. So I have tried to capture these transactions in different slides which are titled bill to ship to model. Now in bill to ship to model, what is happening is supplier. I have shown a pictorial representation wherein three players are there. One is supplier, the second one is recipient, and third one is third person, that is the actual buyer. So here friends, what happens, what I was trying to explain you just few minutes back is supplier may be located in Mumbai, you are a supplier, right? And third person means actual buyer, so I am your customer and I am located in Delhi, correct? Listen carefully, you are supplier, you are located in Mumbai, I am your buyer, correct, actual buyer, so I am located at Delhi, and at my instructions, based on my purchase order and based on contract between you and me, as per my instructions, you are supplying goods to my customer located in Chennai. So recipient, which is indicated in blue in this slide, is located in Chennai. So goods will move from Mumbai to Chennai based on the instructions from actual buyer who is located in Delhi. Have you understood this 3-point or three-party transaction, tripartite transaction? Correct? Supplier, third person, that is actual buyer, and recipient. And here place of supply is equal to principal place of business of the third person. So friends, what happens here? Supplier being located in Mumbai, you, me, the customer is in Delhi, and the ultimate recipient, that is my customer, is in Chennai, right? Then goods are delivered directly from Mumbai to Chennai. They will not go via Delhi. Are you clear? So this is a tripartite type of transaction wherein place of supply, that is the ultimate recipient place, is equal to the principal place of business of third person, that is actual buyer. So in this particular event, IGST will be applicable, right? Further slides will clarify. I have tried to take live example of 2 states and 3 states. Friends, you may recall there was a picture called 2 states, but I am going to show you picture of 2 states as well as 3 states. Okay, please bear with me. I move on to the next slide. Correct? Bill to ship to model under GST, wherein there are 3 states. Correct? See what is happening here, that Ganesh Traders is located in Maharashtra, right? So Ganesh Traders is a supplier. Maruti Traders is located in Karnataka. So Maruti Traders intends to buy goods from Ganesh Traders and ask Ganesh Trader to supply goods directly to Prime Hardware, who is located in Tamil Nadu. So in pictorial representation, you can see the truck. I have shown a road between Maharashtra and Tamil Nadu, and truck is directly going to deliver the goods from Maharashtra to Tamil Nadu. However, there are 2 folds in this transaction. The first transaction is taking place between Maruti Traders of Karnataka and Ganesh Traders of Maharashtra, wherein the billing will be under IGST. I have shown it, indicated it in a blue arrow. Correct? Billing IGST taking place from Ganesh Traders to Maruti Traders. From Maruti Traders, there will be billing further to Prime Hardware, that is from Karnataka to Tamil Nadu. Billing will take place under IGST, which I have indicated under red arrow. Clear? And there was initially a purchase order or a contract from Maruti Traders to Ganesh Traders, which is indicated in black arrow. Have you understood the transactions? Ganesh Traders is going to charge IGST to Maruti Traders located in Karnataka. Maruti Traders in effect will charge IGST to Prime Hardware, who is located in Tamil Nadu, right? That's how the transactions will take place, and the delivery of goods will directly happen from Maharashtra to Tamil Nadu. If you have understood this slide, we move on to the next slide. Scenario 1. Now friends, these three states, once you have understood the basic three states, I have tried to involve little complications and trying to cover the various scenarios which may happen in practical life, right? Scenario 1, here in Maharashtra, two parties are located, that is Maruti Traders and Ganesh Traders in scenario 1 are located in Maharashtra, and Prime Hardware, I am locating him in Karnataka, correct, in scenario 1. So what happens? Maruti Traders places a contract for supply of goods on Ganesh Traders. Both of them are in Maharashtra. So in pursuance of that contract, Ganesh Traders is expected to deliver goods directly to Prime Hardware, who is located in Karnataka. So goods are moving interstate, but since Ganesh Traders and Maruti Traders, the first leg of the transaction, correct, first part of the transaction is being located in Maharashtra, the taxation, GST tax implications on invoice raised by Ganesh Traders will be CGST plus SGST. Friends, understood? Which is indicated by blue arrow. Invoice will move from Ganesh Traders to Maruti Traders charging CGST and SGST, wherein Maruti Traders will raise an invoice on Prime Hardware. Since they are located in two different states, that is Maruti Traders in Maharashtra and Prime Hardwares in Karnataka, Maruti Traders will in turn invoice for the same goods under IGST in his hands, which is indicated in the red arrow. However, the goods will move directly from Ganesh Traders of Maharashtra to Karnataka, Prime Hardware. I hope this slide is clear. The transactions nuances under scenario 1 are clear. I move on to the scenario 2. In scenario 2, friends, what I have tried to do, again I am dealing with in two states, wherein I have retained Ganesh Traders in Maharashtra and I have pushed Maruti Traders in Karnataka. Now, Maruti Traders and Prime Hardware, both of them are in Karnataka. So, Maruti Traders has placed a contract for supply of goods on Ganesh Traders, which is indicated in black arrow. In pursuance of that contract, Ganesh Traders is expected to deliver directly goods from Maharashtra to Karnataka. Goods are moving in interstate. However, Ganesh Traders will invoice to Maruti Traders by charging IGST. So, invoice will move from Ganesh Traders to Maruti Traders charging IGST. And from Maruti Traders, for the supply of goods, invoice will go to Prime Hardware, who is located in Karnataka, by charging CGST and SGST. Are you getting this scenario 2? Yes, if you are clear with scenario 2, then I move on to the next, that is administrative provisions. Registration. Every supplier of supply of goods or services is expected to take a registration under GST when his total turnover exceeds 20 lakhs. For special category states, that is my 7 sisters located in Northeast, right, and Uttarakhand, Jammu Kashmir, right, then those states are 10 lakhs is the limit. So the turnover exceeds 10 lakhs in those states, special category states, then they are supposed to take registration. In other states, other than these special category states, if your turnover exceeds 20 lakhs, then you are supposed to take a registration. Registration, what is the advantage? If you are not registered, which is indicated in a red circle, no registration, then restriction to collect tax. You cannot collect tax. And ITC and SENVAT will lapse. In the sense, whatever you have made purchases, or when GST was introduced, you had made earlier purchases in pre-GST regime and you have paid taxes of excise duty, VAT, CST, etc. All that input tax credit, correct, on your opening stock will get lapsed if you don't continue to register under GST regime. So if you are an unregistered dealer in GST regime, your input credit and SENVAT, Central Value Added Tax Credit, SENVAT credit will lapse, correct. If you are a registered person, correct, under GST regime, then I have shown it in green. Yes, you are registered, a smiling face saying that authorized to collect tax and pass on the credit. Means whatever taxes you collect from somebody, correct, somebody in the sense to whom you are selling the goods, then buyer will be able to take credit of those taxes, whatever you are going to charge. Claim ITC and utilize the same against payment of taxes. It means if you are a registered dealer and you have purchased from another registered dealer, correct, and you have paid tax on that to the government, then that tax paid on your input can be adjusted against your sale. When you are going to sell or supply those goods to somebody within the state or outside the state, you are supposed to collect IGST or C plus SGST as the case may be at the point of sale. Against that output tax, you can adjust your input tax credit, whatever you have paid on your purchases, provided you are a registered dealer. I hope I am clear about the advantages of registration. Now, the another aspect or very important aspect of GST is, friends, GST input tax credit. That input tax credit does away with cascading effect and neutralizing the incidence of tax. What is input tax credit? Input tax credit means whatever taxes you pay in the nature of CGST or UTGST or IGST or SGST at the point of purchase, it will be available in your hands to adjust it against your output tax liability when you sell the goods, correct? So it includes tax paid on reverse charge as well. See, reverse charge is another concept under GST. What is reverse charge concept? Reverse charge concept means if you are importing goods from foreign territory, then the dealer located in foreign territory cannot tax GST to you, because he is not registered, he is not located in India, so he is not expected to be registered in India, so he will not charge any tax. But upon imports, along with custom duty, you have to pay IGST, being importer of the goods or services, correct? So recipient, you are recipient in that case, in that particular transaction. So recipient has to pay tax on importation of goods and services from foreign territory, and once you pay tax upon importation, you are entitled to take credit, because having imported the goods or services, you are not going to use it. You are going to use it for manufacture of other taxable goods, correct? Then when you manufacture some taxable goods and sell further or supply further, at that point of time, you are going to charge your customer CGST and SGST or IGST as the case may be. Against that output liability, you can adjust net off the IGST paid on your imported raw material or import of services, correct, which you have paid under reverse charge. I hope I am clear. Does not include tax paid on composition levy. Friends, composition levy is another aspect of GST. What is composition levy? For small dealers, correct, up to 75 lakhs of turnover, they have said that you can go under composition, right? Composition means either you will charge 1% or 2% or 5% as the case may be, right? If you are a manufacturer, then 1%. If you are going to be a trader or reseller, 2%. And if you are going to be a hotelier, then 5%. That will be the composition. Composition means you will charge concessional rate of tax at the rate of 1% being manufacturer, or 2% being service provider, or 5% being a hotelier or restaurant operator, small hotelier or restaurant operator, wayside operator, right? Then hotelier, then 5%, and you will buy goods at whatever applicable GST rates. You will not get input credit, but you will charge concessional rate of GST to your customers, correct? That is composition, correct? Round rate of tax, 1%, 2% or 5%, correct? But then your end customers, when they end up paying you 1% composition or 2% composition or 5% composition, then they will not get any input tax credit with respect to the composition tax they have paid you, right? Likewise, you as a composition dealer will not have or entitled any input tax credit on your inputs of goods and services, on your purchases. Clear? So that is composition of levy. I move to the next slide. Adjustment of tax summary. Friends, what is happening? When CGST is there, if you have purchased some goods and you have paid CGST component, then that CGST you can adjust it against CGST payable in your hands on supply of goods, correct? Or if you have your output liability in terms of IGST, you can adjust CGST against IGST. Now move to SGST. If you have SGST credit in your hands, means you have purchased goods and you have paid SGST component. So that SGST input credit will be available in your hands, that can be adjusted against SGST output liability in your hands or IGST output liability in your hands. Likewise, I move on to IGST. If you have purchased something in intrastate trade or commerce, so you end up paying IGST on your purchases, intrastate purchases. Now with that intrastate purchases, if you have manufactured something here in Maharashtra and going to sell to your end customer, then at the point of sale or supply, you are going to charge CGST and SGST. So the IGST input tax credit available in your hands, which you have paid to your supplier, can be adjusted against the output liability of CGST and SGST in your hands. But they say that the order of priority for setting off of IGST is IGST to be adjusted against IGST first. Then further IGST credit is remaining in your hands, then it can be adjusted against your output CGST liability. And after adjusting output CGST liability, if anything is remaining in your hands, then that IGST credit can be adjusted against SGST output liability credit. I hope I am clear. Correct? CGST, your input credit in the form of CGST basket can be adjusted against CGST output liability or IGST output liability. In case of SGST basket of your input credit, it can be adjusted against SGST liability of your output and IGST liability on output. And in case of IGST credit of input tax basket, it can be adjusted against IGST first. Anything is left over, then can be adjusted against CGST, and then further anything excess IGST is pending in IGST basket, it can be adjusted against your output SGST liability. I hope I am clear. Friends, at the cost of repetition in the next slide, also I am just trying to give you adjustment of applicable taxes. CGST can be adjusted against CGST, but CGST input tax credit cannot be adjusted against SGST output liability. Likewise, SGST output liability cannot be adjusted against discharging CGST output liability. I hope you are clear. CGST can be adjusted against CGST. CGST can be adjusted against IGST. CGST cannot be adjusted against SGST. Like that, SGST can be adjusted against SGST, SGST can be adjusted against IGST, but SGST cannot be adjusted against CGST. Am I clear? Yes. I move on to the next slide. Who can avail tax adjustment benefit? Unregistered person cannot avail tax adjustment benefit, that is adjusting input tax credit against output tax liability. Registered person can do that. And who can adjust it? If credit is admissible and will be credited to electronic credit ledger. So friends, here the concept of electronic credit ledger you should understand. Electronic credit ledger is nothing else but it is just like your bank passbook. So whenever you purchase goods from somebody and you happen to pay him CGST and SGST, assume I am a supplier, I am supplying goods to you, you are located in Maharashtra. So when I am supplying goods to you, I am going to invoice you at 100 plus 9 CGST and 9 SGST, correct? So 118. When you pay me 100 plus 18, you will get credit in your electronic credit ledger of 9 rupees SGST paid to me and 9 rupees CGST paid to me, because you have deposited, you have paid that GST to me along with the basic price of goods 100 plus 18, but that 18 I have not kept in my pocket. 18 rupees collected by me is being in turn deposited to the government in CGST and SGST basket. So whatever you have paid the taxes to me or via me to the government, you are entitled to take credit. It will appear in your electronic credit ledger. If it appears in your electronic credit ledger, then only you can adjust it against your output GST liability. In turn, when you supply the goods and you charge C and SGST to your end customer. I hope I am clear about electronic credit ledger. And when you will pay me CGST and SGST upon your purchase, it will appear as a credit in your electronic credit ledger. Same goods, when you are going to supply it to your customer, maybe say at 200 rupees. So at 200 rupees, you will charge 18%, means 36 rupees. So your liability, output liability will be 36. That is 18 SGST and 18 as CGST. Against that 18 CGST and 18 SGST output liability in your hands, you can adjust 9 rupees CGST and 9 rupees SGST, which you have paid to the government via me at the point of purchase. That is how electronic credit ledger will be debited. So electronic credit ledger is initially credited by 9 and 9 CGST and SGST in your GST registration number. When you will sell goods and you will charge on 200 rupees 36, against that 36 output liability of yours, you can adjust this 9 and 9, 18. And in effect, you have to deposit 18 to the government. Are you getting my point? When you deposit this 18 to the government, your end customer will get input credit of 36 because you have charged 36 rupees to your end customer, 18 as CGST and 18 as SGST. When he pays you 236, that 36 rupees will appear in his electronic, your end customer's electronic ledger, provided he is a registered dealer. If he is an end customer, then he is consuming those goods along with 36 rupees tax. Am I clear? If he is an end customer, he is not going to further utilize it into trade chain and not going to collect GST on his point of supply, then he will not get credit. He is not entitled to credit. Are you clear? Yes. I move on to the next slide. That conditions for availment of GST, that when you can avail GST credit, that you should be in possession of a tax invoice issued by a registered supplier and other prescribed document, that is delivery challan, correct, or tax invoice or debit note or tax invoice or bill of entry for home clearance, that is in case of imported goods. So either a tax invoice or a debit note or a bill of entry, correct, duly assessed by customs. These are the documents. So you should have in your possession the documents. So in effect, you should receive goods and services under a cover of duty paid document, GST paid document. Then only you are entitled for credit. He has received the goods or services or both, correct. So actual receipt of goods or services, genuine receipt of goods and services is another precondition to avail credit. The tax charge in respect of such supply has been actually paid to the government. Here, government has intelligently carved out that whatever tax is charged, correct, by the supplier should be effectively deposited into the government treasury. It means if I have sold goods to you at 100 and 9C GST plus 9 SGST, so irrespective of the fact that whether you are paying me for goods and GST, on due date, on my outward liability, I should deposit 9 and 9, 18 rupees. If I deposit that tax, then only you will get credit, correct? And I have furnished, correct, my return under section 39, monthly consolidated return, that is GSTR 3B, if I have filed. So if I have supplied you goods and services, you have received physically goods and services, you have received those goods and services under the cover of either GST charged invoice or debit note or bill of entry for home consumption for clearance from customs, correct, that document, and I have furnished my return under GSTR 3B under section 39 in due date, and I have deposited that 9 rupees plus 9 rupees collected from you to the government. If all these conditions are cumulatively satisfied, you as my customer are entitled to take credit of GST credited in your electronic credit ledger. I hope I am clear. Now, if the goods have been received by you in lots or installment, then you are entitled to take credit only when you receive the last lot or last installment. That is the provision. Then further, the payment of input service shall be made within 180 days. Friends, in India, people try to act smart, or rather I would say not smart, over smart. So here the example, I'll just try to clarify this point with example. What happens is, I have supplied you goods with 100 rupees and 9 CGST plus 9 SGST, so 118. Now what you do is smartly that you get invoice from me, you get goods from me, and you don't pay me within 180 days. Then you have received the goods, you have received the goods and services, you have received the invoice, I have deposited 18 rupees to the government, I have filed my return of outward supply GSTR 3B within stipulated time, correct? So all the conditions are satisfied, so you are entitled for 9 and 9 rupees credit. But friends, if you don't tend to pay me 118 rupees within 180 days from the date of invoice, then whatever credit available to you will be reversed in electronic credit ledger. You will not be entitled to receive and adjust that credit. Or if you have already adjusted and eaten away that credit against your outward liability of CGST and SGST, and you have not paid me, you have kept me unpaid for more than 180 days, then I should not be punished, because effectively I have deposited 9 plus 9 in the 0th period of time, correct, in the month in which I have sold goods to you. But you have not paid me that 9 plus 9, but you have taken credit, then such credit availed by you will be reversed in your hands after 180 days, and that time it will be reversed along with 18% interest in the nature of penalty, correct? So here they are trying to keep dual control, that if somebody does badmashi, that is, if I do badmashi of collecting 9 and 9 rupees or charging 9 and 9 rupees, correct, CGST and SGST on the face of invoice, and don't tend to deposit it to the government treasury, you will not get credit. Supposing like a gentleman, I have charged you 9 plus 9 and I have paid that tax, deposited that tax to the government treasury, but you have tried to take undue advantage and you are keeping me unpaid beyond 180 days. You are trying to be extra smart that okay, I will not pay sir 100 rupees as well as 18 rupees of GST, but I have already taken credit because I have already invoiced from the sir and I have received the goods. Then friends, after 180 days, you will be required to reverse the input credit which you have availed against my payment of 9 plus 9 rupees, correct, along with 18% interest. Right? No ITC shall be allowed in respect of an invoice issued after the furnishing of annual return or return under section 39 for the month of September following the end of financial year, whichever is earlier. So here again they are giving you administrative relief. What is the administrative relief? Many a times when I raise an invoice, by fluke, by chance or by mistake, you don't tend to account it for in your books of accounts, correct? It remains unaccounted. Then you are not entitled to take credit, but you can take credit provided you are going to book it within 1 year from the date of invoice or within furnishing of my annual return, and my annual return, the due date is September of the next financial year. So assume the financial year 18-19, that is from 1st April 18 to 31st March 19, and I have raised invoice to you in the month of April 18. You are supposed to take credit on that invoice up to 31st March 19, correct, or before September 19, whichever is earlier, correct. So you cannot afford to book my invoice beyond 1 year. So 1 year is a sufficient time to rectify your records, to properly account for the invoice for your purchases. If you are lethargic, you are not accounted for your invoices for 1 year from the date of invoice, or before me filing of, or before you filing of your annual return, that is 30th September 19, then that credit is lost, correct. So here the government is trying, GST authorities are trying to bring into effect the accounting discipline. Credit cannot be availed after expiry of the 1 year from the date of issue of invoice, or last day of avail input tax credit for financial year 17-18 would be 20th of October, correct. 30th September 2018 return can be filed on 20th of October because before 20 days from the end of the month, correct. So September 18 return can be filed before 20th of October. So for financial year 17-18, you can take the credit within 1 year from the date of invoice or before 20th of October 2018, whichever is earlier, correct. Friends, I hope with this I have completed the discussion, and this is a question answer time slide, and the next slide, as the every presentation should have, is nothing else but thank you. right? Now here I would like to introduce you or share with you one important aspect of GST is prior to GST regime, especially on branch transfers, there was no tax payable, no VAT or no CST payable. But in GST regime, there is a big difference being brought or introduced. They say that if you are making some branch transfer means, say for example, Larsen and Toubro Powai, Mumbai is transferring some goods, shifting some goods to Larsen and Toubro, Chennai, correct? Right? In the state of Tamil Nadu. Then actually there is no sale being taking place because you cannot sell goods to yourself, right? Goods will be sold to some outsider, some different entity, but not to the same entity. So it is a branch transfer. So under branch transfer, under pre-GST regime, there was no taxable event called sale. So branch transfer was not liable for sales tax or VAT. But under GST regime, what they have said is the L&T Powai should charge IGST to L&T Chennai, and L&T Chennai will take credit of that IGST when in turn L&T Chennai sells goods locally within the state of Tamil Nadu. So on branch transfers, here under GST, L&T Chennai and L&T Powai will be considered as two different independent registering authorities and they will be asked upon to pay the taxes. However, whatever tax paid, IGST, correct, whatever IGST charged by L&T Powai to L&T Chennai can take credit of that IGST, correct? And that's how it can be made revenue neutral. It is not a cost, but GST will be payable. GST will be payable at full applicable rate on branch transfers. That is the difference between GST, pre-GST regime and post-GST regime. I hope I have given you sufficient insight into GST with this elementary presentation. Thank you for patient hearing, and as and when you need to rebrush your knowledge, you can revisit this video along with the presentation, correct? You can run presentation and simultaneously listen to my voice, correct? Thank you.
Friends, now we are heading towards the end of the presentation. Last two typical slides, that is, one is question answers time, and the last slide, thank you for the presentation. With this, let me conclude that I have tried to explain the indirect tax implications, correct, pre-GST regime in video part 1 on indirect taxes and post-GST regime in video part 2. I hope you have understood the indirect tax as a subject and has got definitely some insight into the subject, right? I hope with this last video, that is the 6th video, my video lecture session series I am concluding. I'm sure it will be definitely helpful to you as and when you need any kind of explanation or you want to rebrush the information on taxation. You can refer to these video sessions and it will prove helpful to you. Thank you.